this series. I know we've already been seeing in the chat all the sad faces and people are bummed about this coming to an end. But again, remember we are talking about either repeating the session synchronously next spring or a deeper dive or a combination of both for folks. So, so keep checking back on our website and we'll keep pushing out some messages to keep you connected as we plan ahead. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you to CDE and El Dorado and Riverside counties for making this whole series available to participants at no cost. We are thrilled you guys are here. Cannot believe this is the last session. Please keep checking that Padlet because the recording and the slides and everything will be uploaded after today's session as well. And I believe Katie said, feel free to share that information, share it broadly so that this work can continue. So thank you, Katie. I know the session goes fast and just want to really, honestly, truly from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for this partnership. This work is so important and so incredible and so authentic, and no one better to lead this series than you. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I have absolutely loved spending this time with you. It was weird how quickly it went by. Like it's like, you know, at the end of the year when I used to be in the classroom, I used to get really sad at the end of the year. Like some people were like, woo, like it's over. And I'm like, my babies, like they're leaving. Because I just became so incredibly attached to my kids and their families. And that's how I feel after this short session. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to absolutely dive into the work. Just so you know, all the slide decks for the previous 4 series, all of the recordings, all of those are available to you in that Padlet. We organized it so if you look on the left-hand side, it says webinar resources. And if you scroll down, that is where you're going to find everything, the recordings and the slide decks. And the Padlet is indefinite. It will be there forever. So definitely feel free to use it and share anything on it. I'm going to dive into our slide deck tonight. If you would like, the slide deck is also on that Padlet, so definitely feel free to follow. As always, I'm going to make sure to turn on that closed captioning, which is such a bonus feature of Google Slides and just makes our lives so much easier with such little work. So if you received the conference in a box, right? We were so excited about this, Kristen and I, when we were talking about it, because like you go to so many trainings and like, then I'm scattered all around my office, like looking for Post-its or like, this is a great note, or, you know, oh, I wish I had that book. And we're like, wouldn't it be so cool to like create a box that like everything that you need is already there? You know, there's the book, there's highlighters, there's printed out articles. And then there's 3 like kind of bizarre things. The first was the water beads, in which we said those really symbolized with the right conditions, we are all capable of growth. They seem like these hard, closed off, little colorful specks, but when they are submerged in water, they grow. And what are the conditions that all of our learners need so that they too can grow at the highest of levels? The next thing that you saw, we talked about this in webinar number 4, were these sticky hands, which were some of my favorite things when I was little. You know, and you get them going, boom, 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 and then you slap them against a window, right? And they're stuck. And what we want these to symbolize is how important it is to really stretch your thinking about what is possible, but then also stick with UDL. Stick with UDL as an iterative framework for creating the right conditions for growth. And the last thing that you will see if you received a conference in a box is a bubble wand. Now, why on earth are we giving bubble wands? Bubbles are awesome. That's number 1. But also when you think about the bubble, right? We want UDL and your students to just blow your mind, like to really expand your mind about their sheer brilliance. Also to make sure that you're really expanding your vision and your belief about what is possible, and make sure that you just like pop that old system, you know, pop the norms, pop the status quo. We don't need to do things like this anymore. I was heartbroken today because I was reading an article about the nation's report card. You know, there's a National Center for Education Statistics, and I had not looked at it in a while, and I'm doing research on an article about UDL and literacy. And so I went to the nation's report card. And do you know, last year, pre-COVID, so it was like the spring of 2019 was the last time that they were able to do the test because everybody kind of waived their standardized tests last spring. But the 2019 spring data is the most recent data available. And there was actually a decline across the board in every category in literacy from 2017 to 2019. And considering everything that we're doing and all of our intent is we're actually losing kids. Our systems currently are not only not effective, is they're getting less effective, giving the beautiful diversity of our students. And so pop that, okay? So again, use your bubbles, use your water beads. And really what all of this is about for me is what are the conditions that are necessary? And all of the organizations that you are about to see agree on those conditions. So notice all of these organizations, coming back to all of these organizations and what they stand for.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
And what I love is in the spring, 50 different organizations came together and agreed on the conditions that all of our students need to learn. These are just some of those organizations, but you can see really vast reach in both education and in civil rights. So we have the nation's largest teachers unions, the NEA, which is the National Educator Association, the AFT, which is the American Federation of Teachers. You know, so many organizations here, the NAACP, the Southern Poverty Law Center. They are behind kind of the work of teaching tolerance. And we're looking at all of this. And so what did they say? And they signed a joint statement of equity on COVID-19 and beyond. And in that publication, they actually said, all of us agree that if we're truly going to meet the needs of our learners, then every single LEA, every local education association, so every single school district, every single school has to provide educators with the tools and the professional development to ensure that lessons are always designed using the principles of universal design for learning. So not only is this in federal legislation in the Every Student Succeeds Act, not only is this written into the California MTSS blueprint, is civil rights organizations who are not connected in any way to the status quo of education are saying our kids need universal design. And why do our kids need universal design? And in the book, Mirko and I really try to highlight kind of the best of the framework and how it doesn't only lend itself to more accessibility and more engagement, but equity. And UDL at its core is really about these 6 things. Number 1 is we embrace the variability and the lived experiences of all of our learners. We see them for who they are, and we recognize that one-size-fits-all systems create significant barriers for many learners. The next is we always focus on that firm goal. We need high expectations for every single learner. And so we have to have the same expectations for all students, regardless of variability, and the same expectations for all staff, regardless of variability. And to do that, if we embrace variability and we also recognize what are these really high expectations, then we need to create really flexible pathways in order for everybody to self-differentiate their own journey. And this is really all about that voice and that choice, that self-differentiation. UDL is not only about choices, but that is a part of it. And ultimately, we need to ensure that we are creating a structure in which we're always reflecting on the choices that we've made to determine, did that get me closer to the firm goal of where I want to be? And so this is so much bigger than having a lesson plan that has a couple of choices in it. This is about high expectations for all students, regardless of variability, and really optimizing voice and choice. And really what this creates, the foundation of the system, is truly the highest of expectations for all learners. And when I say all learners, there's no but there, okay? So everyone's like, oh yeah, I see this working for many students, but what about? Okay, there's no but what about here in my mind. Every student deserves access to grade level rigor with teachers who have the highest expectations for their work. And the reality is that is not currently happening in many areas of this country. And I want to give you time in a universally designed way to see what I'm talking about here. And so Janelle, would you please put that link in the chat? So it's the closest thing to the bottom of the chat, again, to the Padlet, because I'm going to click on it and I'm going to show you all what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to give you 5 minutes using multiple means of representation to learn more about this. So if you click on that Padlet, it's going to take you to this website that all of you have access to. It's the Equity by Design resources. And the way that we organized it, you can see it's warming up. It's warming up for us, is on the left-hand side, there is going to be, it says Equity by Design webinar resources. And I highlighted the top of that in purple. So if you see color, you can be a little bit more drawn to it. And so you have the slide deck, and then you have this little box here that says opportunity gap. Now, the opportunity myth is essentially, a lot of people use the term achievement gap. And there is a lot of work saying that, you know, an achievement gap is really an outcome for an opportunity gap, which is that some students simply do not have the chance to work at high levels. And so they did this very large research study. The full peer-reviewed study is available in that link, but I only want you to access the abstract to the study, which really goes over kind of the main findings. And you can read it if you are a comfortable reader, if you don't mind reading online. I've also taken what is under the reading link, right? So you can go in the reading link and you can read it. I've also taken that research brief and I've recorded my voice so you could listen to me read it. That will take 2.5 minutes. And also there is an app that's called Papago, which is considered to be the best version of translation. You can take the copy of the text that you would have read, and then you put it here in English, you translate it. But the cool thing about this is you can also have it read to you. So it doesn't only translate it, but it translates it and reads it to you. So there are a lot of different options. Again, I will write the directions again in the chat box once you get started. But I want to give you 5 minutes to go into that Padlet to either read or listen to or translate a very short research brief on something that is now called the opportunity myth or the opportunity gap. I'm going to play super low classical music to mark our time here. If that is disruptive to you in any way, you can just mute it, open up me reading in another window, open up Papago in another window, and you can access it that way. So we're going to take 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes, you are going to read or listen to or translate the opportunity myth. When you come back from that 5 minutes, you're going to share your gut reaction to reading the research brief. Again, it is a gold standard study. So when we talk about evidence base, it has to be done in a way that's like rigorous and peer reviewed. This study does count as an evidence-based study. So you're going to read it or listen to it, and then you're going to share using either words or emojis your reaction to reading that, okay? So 5 minutes, I'll put the instructions in the chat again if there's any question about that, and then we're gonna come back together. So I love that already some of you have shared. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to kind of share your thoughts. Feel free to use emojis, feel free to use your words. The thing, Candace, you just nailed it. What I was going to say, the thing that bothers me the most, like viscerally, is that this is about choices adults are making. It's not about choices that students are making. And so much of UDL is really planted in that firm goals, flexible means that every student deserves access to grade level rigor and high expectations. And that for me this is so alterable. We have to make different choices as adults. And what I love is they list the 4 things that all students need, and all of them align to the UDL framework. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes here to just share your thoughts. If you didn't get a chance, scroll up and read it. And then when this 2-minute piano interlude is over, we're going to dive more deeply into, so what do we do next to try to put these 4 conditions in place? Nancy, that one too is like, these students are led to believe they're doing well. And yet at a national level, we don't even have, we're down to 36% of kids nationally who can read at grade level. And granted, we only do the nation's report card in grades 4, 8, and 10, but we're talking millions and millions of kids. And only 36, it used to be 38%, we're down to 36% of students who are reading at grade level. And what I loved is Danny said, like, we're always hearing we have to go slow. And we cannot go slow on this. Okay. And what I think is that we have to really prioritize what is the most important work. And so I want to leave you with this series with an idea of how to move forward. There are so many resources. Everybody kind of has a sense of what needs to be done, what needs to be changed. But then the big question is, well, how do you change it? And so recently I am newly obsessed with a book that is called, it's right over there, I'm going to grab it, it's on my shelf. It is called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Now, my husband is a senior sales director at a software company, and the last 2 times that he was hired for a new job, recruited for a new job, his employer gave him this book. So I have 2 copies of this sitting around my house. And out of like complete boredom, there's a cute little sticker on it that says the #1 best-selling book on Wall Street Journal. I'm like, nah, right? So I'm like literally leafing through it, and then I'm like you devour it, you know? And this book for me was like, this is it, right? Now, the 4 disciplines of execution is essentially a 4-step process that these super like corporate kind of consultants talk to large organizations about how to meet their goals. And what I love about it is they do give some examples of education, but the best thing about this is I started reading it and they talk about how even though we know that things have to change, we often get sucked into the whirlwind. And the whirlwind is essentially what they say is all of the things that act on us but the most important things are things that we act on. So like as an administrator, you know, I spend a lot of time doing like mandatory state reporting. I do a lot of time answering emails from colleagues. I spend a lot of time when things get escalated up to HR or escalated to parents. I deal a lot with that. And the most important thing for me has always been and always will be that all students have access to grade level universal design instruction, and that all students can report being engaged in their teaching and learning. I would say as an administrator, if I spent 2% of my time on that, I think that that would actually be liberal. I didn't spend a lot of time on that. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. And so they talk about like, we have to recognize that this whirlwind is real and that it sucks you in. And so, you know, you would like to take time to say like, how do I design a really great curriculum? How do I make sure I connect with every single one of my learners? How do I make sure that I can connect with all of my families? And you could do that if there wasn't this whirlwind. And so they said the whirlwind is like the day job, all the stuff that you have to do and all the things that act on you. And it says the real enemy of growth and change is the whirlwind. Okay, so I love that just to start. Okay, so we have to recognize the whirlwind. Now, once we recognize the whirlwind, we have to recognize that often the whirlwind affects leaders negatively because it doesn't allow them to do the work that allows stakeholders to feel really good in their jobs. Now, in this book, they cite the research of a researcher named Lencioni, and they said that the 3 most common reasons why people leave their jobs is not because they're not paid enough. It's not necessarily like, oh, I don't like my colleagues. It's these 3 things. Number 1 is they feel like their leaders don't have any idea how much they're doing. Okay, how many of us, you know, at some point can relate to that? Number 2, they don't think that what they're doing is making any difference. The things that they're being asked to do, they do not see a positive impact. And then the 3rd is they have no idea if they're actually making a contribution. And I've been there. I always call it like an existential crisis when I'm just like, I worked all week and I don't feel like I freaking did anything to move the needle. Like, I hate this feeling of being like, I worked for 40 hours as an assistant superintendent, and like, did that change anything for anyone? Or was it just crap? Right. And I struggle with that. Right. And so when we think about these 3 signs of a miserable job, how do we combat those signs of a miserable job while also focusing on what our greatest goals are? And so this is the 4-step process. So the first is what are your wildly important goals? What is it that you really want for kids? The next is understanding what a lead measure is. And for me, this was like, yes, this makes sense. Keeping a scoreboard of your lead measures and then creating a cadence of accountability. So those are the 4 disciplines of execution. And for me, once I started learning about lead measures and lag measures, like everything that we talked about in the book started making more sense to me. So here it is. Number 1, they say that you cannot have more than 1 or 2 goals as an organization. And like, I can't even have a poker face about the strategic plans that I've helped to write. Okay. You get 1 or 2. And what they actually said, and they have the research behind it, which made me like kind of want to throw up in my mouth a little bit, is they said that organizations that have 1 to 2 goals actually meet 1 to 2 goals. And it's actually like an inverse proportion. So the organizations that have 10 to 20 goals, okay, anyone want to make a guess? How many do they meet? Okay, so if you have 1 to 2 goals, you're very likely to meet 1 to 2 goals. Correct, Jody, 0. 0, right? Like, again, evidence base here. The more goals you have, the less likely you will meet any of them because you are spread too thin. And it makes good sense, actually, but it doesn't often go into practice, right? So like, what really are your wildly important goals? Now for me, I'm going to share what my wildly important goals are, and I'm going to ask you what your wildly important goals are a little bit later in the chat. But the first is one of my wildly important goals is I want all students working at grade level standards. Period. End of story. That is a wildly important goal for me. And the other is that all students report actually feeling engaged, which means they are challenged and they are connected. Okay, there's that feeling of community and they feel challenged. They can report that they're doing work they never thought they would do. Okay, and so the more goals that we have, and we feel this, right? Because there's no time, no one's getting any more time, no one's getting any more money, and then we keep getting more goals, right? We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then you're like, I'm not doing any of this well anymore. And so what they do is they are actually consultants that go in and tell companies like Apple and Bank of America, like, get flipping 1 or 2 goals. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have, like, you know, different objectives under those goals. But if I say everything we do in this school, everything we do in this system is to make sure that all students are working at least grade level standards, then I'm going to have to say, well, then I'm going to have to know more about scaffolding and universal design and schedule, right? Other things come with it. So what I want you to think about right now is, I'm going to give you, you know, a minute here, is what are your wildly important goals for this school year? Now, you can have 2, okay? So, but you can't have more than 2, okay? Now, I want you to really think about, like, if you could change what your school improvement plan was to 2 things or 1 thing, 2 things or 1 thing, okay? What are those wildly important goals? So here's some music. As always, share your wildly important goal. Just a dream. Okay, so that's the first step, is like actually defining your wildly important goals. You know, there's like a bazillion standard in every class, but what I would tell students is, like, all of you will become learners and will be able to comprehend grade level text. As an English teacher, like, you're going to read grade level text, you're going to respond to grade level text. I will scaffold the heck out of it for you, but like, that's my wildly important work. And what I noticed is, as I was scanning through them, is like, I didn't see frameworks, right? I didn't see UDL, I didn't see, it's not in mine, right? I didn't see PBIS, I didn't see, right? Because it's bigger than that. Like, UDL is a vehicle, PBIS is a vehicle. It's not the goal. Like, my goal would never be UDL, ever, right? And so it wouldn't be as a part of my improvement plan. My goal is that all kids are learning at high levels. And so one of the things that I know I need to do is to implement UDL. but the goal is not UDL for me. Okay. That is a vehicle to help us get there. And so once you identify your wildly important goals, what you want for equity, what you want for access, and what I notice here is when you say all, you say all. I want all students to be, practicing with their math talk. I want all educators to, understand how to begin to close the opportunity gap. I want all right? This is about every single student. And we have to recognize that in order to do that, we're going to have to create flexible pathways to get us there. And so what I am obsessed with about this is they talk a lot about this concept of lead measures and lag measures. In schools, we're obsessed with lag measures. Okay, standardized test data, student survey data, teacher self-perception data, mostly grades, right? So by the time I do a standardized test, right? Let's say that I walk into your district and I test every kid in reading and I get those results. They lag behind what actually happened. Okay, those test scores tell me that what happened before created these results. So they're lagging, okay? And what they say in this book is that you will never, ever, ever in a million years make improvements by focusing on lag measures, okay? Every data meeting I've been in is pretty much focused on lag measures. Why did this happen? Blah, 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 right? And what they say is essentially like, acknowledge the lag measures, and then say, okay, this is where things are. We need to predict what actions that we could take that would impact those lag measures. So the data meeting is an acknowledgement only of like, let's look, okay, 38% of our students are proficient in reading. One of our wildly important goals is that all students can read grade level text. And therefore we need to figure out what is the influenceable and predictive thing that I could do that I think would move the lag measure. So this is very much, if any of you ever went to school where you did action research, it's essentially like, this is what the data says, and I know that I can influence something, and this is what I'm gonna do. And so the objectives, this is kind of, hopefully I'm answering Mark's question, okay? The objectives are essentially what is influenceable and what is alterable that would move the lag measure. Okay, so if my wildly important goal are that all students are engaged, and we give a student-wide survey and we ask them, like, you feel really connected to staff, you feel really challenged, and only 50% say yes or no, okay, it's like, okay, that is what it is. Now let's put our heads together. What is it that we feel like would make a really big impact on student engagement? I probably would say, I want 10 minutes alone with every one of my students every single week. Okay, I think one of the greatest ways to build engagement is to build relationships first. And that got swept under the rug a lot with this online. Everybody has to be online asynchronously. Because in a classroom, you can like sit next to a kid for a couple minutes, and even if they're all in the room. And it's much more difficult to do if you're working remotely. So let's say that, if our ultimate goal is that all students feel engaged, okay, then my objective is going to be, I want to connect with every student. And what's really cool about this is you actually create a scoreboard for yourself. And so if you think about all potential lead measures, right? So you might say, if all students are going to have access to grade level rigor, then we need to have grade level meetings co-planning with grade level standards. That has to happen. So I might say, as a principal or an assistant superintendent, I am willing to give up one of my faculty meetings so grade levels can plan a grade level lesson, like actually have it out and say, what exactly is this asking students to know and do? How can we make sure that we're not lowering the bar here? And then I would say, okay, this week I'm going to give up a faculty meeting. I'm going to provide with a tool, and they're going to all design a grade level text, okay? What I'm measuring now is the thing that I did. I might say, I also want all teachers to observe at least 2 colleagues a month in instructional rounds. So one of the best ways to scale effective practices is to see other people model those effective practices. So I want to create a culture where we're more willing to share what we're doing, because the better that we have relationships with ourselves, like the more that we're going to focus. Also, I want to make sure, because I care very much about student engagement, I want to make every kid is silent mentored. This was something I always did as a teacher, is we would take all of our 7th grade students. We would literally, the principal would email everybody an Excel spreadsheet of every kid in 7th grade. And it was, if you have a great relationship with a kid, highlight the kid's name. If the kid's name is already highlighted, don't worry about it. Keep moving. And what was heartbreaking to me is, let's say we had 300 7th graders. They sent it to the guidance counselors. They sent it to the women who worked in the cafeteria. They sent it to, bus drivers, administrators, the core teachers, the integrated arts teachers. There would be like 40 kids who no one highlighted. Kids who just completely had fallen, like no one could say, I really have a great relationship with that kid. And so there would be a ton of us, and we would evenly distribute them. So everybody got 2 or 3 kids. And you had to talk to those kids 3 times a week, no matter what. If they were sick, you'd have to call home. You'd have to send an email. If there were sports on campus, you'd walk over and see the grade. And I remember I had a student one year, I became like a stage 5 clinger, because we were so worried about him. He would come to school without shoes on, and he was always like carving his arms. And so I would always be like, hey, so I'd like go to the cafeteria to buy like a water so I could like sit at his table, and I'd like stalk him at his locker. And I actually wrote an article about it. Janelle, Vanna, if you could find it, if you just Google Katie Novak silent mentoring, I wrote an article about it that I'm sure you could put there. And so I would stalk this child. And so all of 7th grade, I was like always all around him. And, he goes on to 8th grade. And I wouldn't say that there was any breakthrough where I felt like silent mentoring was like the greatest thing that ever happened. But at the end of 8th grade, I got a copy of the yearbook, and I like literally like ugly cried when I opened it, because in it, they say like what their favorite memory of middle school was and who was like their favorite teacher. And this sweet boy wrote, I will never forget it. I still like have it. He said, my favorite teacher of all time in middle school was Mrs. Novak. She's the only person who's ever understood me. And I was like, oh my gosh. But what we would do is we just decide, okay, here are 2 or 3 things that I'm going to do every single week. That's it. Okay. Everything else acts on me, but I get to decide what I act on. And the way that the authors create it is they have like a very realistic schedule of what it looks like, because they said like, if this is your week that gets sucked in the whirlwind. And they're very realistic about the fact that, so this is like how they do it here. You see this box? The light gray is the whirlwind. It says like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And what I like about this is that like they know that like we can't suddenly say, I'm going to spend 40 hours a week doing the most important thing. It's so sad that they know that that's true, because we know it's true also. We have to go to meetings. We have to do IEP paperwork. We have to be online for a certain amount of time. We have to grade assessments. Like those things have to happen, even though they're not huge drivers of student learning. They're not. Like if you look at effect sizes and Hattie's effect size, it's like collective efficacy, how good I feel about my own teaching. It's my expectations for kids. It's self-reported grading, for God's sakes. The 3rd highest predictor of student achievement is when you let them grade their own crap, right? And we're spending so much time grading. And again, we have to move. But what I like about this is I will carve time for this. Okay, so this is when you're saying like how many is 2 objectives. If the only thing that I commit to is I'm going to grade 1 meeting a week, I'm going to figure out time for my teachers to co-plan. Okay, twice a month, I will cover the classrooms myself to make sure they can observe their colleagues. I'm going to make sure that silent mentoring is happening, and then I'm going to model what I want to see in classrooms so they can get more ideas. Okay, that's it. And then this is the magic here, is I am accountable to a team every single week to share if I was able to pull it off or not. And I think that this is the magic of this work, is you have to find other strong people who believe in this work to say, you know what, our administrators want evidence. They want data. That's what they want. That's what they love, right? And pretty much anything that you do that you say, this was our goal, we did this for 6 weeks, this is the growth, no one is going to tell you to stop if there's growth there. And so when you look at this, it's all your team does. It could be 5 minutes. If there's only 3 of you, I would say, all right, everyone, quick silent mentoring meeting. Last week I said that I was going to try to get to this child's baseball game. I did see him once in the cafeteria. I did go by his locker, but I actually did get out to see the baseball game. And so I did all 3 of the things I said I was going to do. This week, it's my goal to try to push him a little bit more academically. So I'm going to focus on like 3 times in the class, seeing that now, that's it. right? It's like an accountability group. And so those 4 disciplines of execution, I feel like in many ways are the next step to this equity work, is that people right now, the whirlwind is more serious than it's ever been, right? We're drowning in the whirlwind, like the COVID whirlwind, the online whirlwind. There's like more prep, there's more paperwork. But if we can say, what is it that we really want? And then we can see the impact of the things that we're doing on what we really want. It starts to address some of the reasons why people leave their jobs. Is it doesn't feel like I am making a difference anymore. It doesn't feel like everything I'm doing matters one damn bit. Student achievement is going down. Student engagement is going down, and I'm working my ass off, and this sucks. Okay. But you know that this is alterable. It just might be that the whirlwind isn't having you do the right things to make it alterable. And when you see that it's alterable, and when you share that it's alterable, it creates a different culture of that we can change things and have better outcomes. And so what I want you to do now is kind of recognize that, you know, the wildly important work that we're doing is to make sure that every kid has an equal opportunity to learn at really high levels. And to do that, we have to be trauma informed and culturally responsive, and we have to universally design. And throughout this series, we've given you a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. We've given you numerous resources. If you go to that Padlet, those of you who have a conference in the box have a copy of that book to dive more deeply into. We've talked about the importance of radical candor, and I've tried to model UDL as much as possible in these really short online sections. But the last thing that I would love for you to do here before we kind of go off into our own worlds to achieve our own wildly important goals is I want you to think back on this series. And you can leaf through your book. You can reflect on some of the resources on that Padlet. And you might look at your bookmark, because the first time we met, I said, like, quotes that really matter to you, start to put them on that bookmark. And what I would love for all of you to do as we end this series is to share one important takeaway, something that was planted in this series that you are going to take with you, regardless of how small, regardless of how large. It might be that you've made new connections that you can create accountability groups with. It might be that you have a new idea to share with your team. Again, any of the resources, any of the videos, feel free to distribute and to share. But let's take 2 minutes here and just think back on these 5 amazing sessions together and share what is your most important takeaway about this concept of equity by design. Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to do more than one, absolutely. Now, I have to share with you, I loved that one of you put the feedback triggers. And So I don't know if I shared this. I don't think I shared this with you. Stop me if I did, but I'm pretty confident I didn't. Is that when I was an assistant superintendent of schools, every year we used to do something called a central office report card. And after our teachers would put their grades for the trimester for the students, we would send out a report card and we would say to the teachers, we work for you, grade us. And there were 3 subjects they had to grade us on. The first was visibility. The second was our ability to act as a resource. And our third was communication. So the way that we would set up the report card is we would make an anonymous Google form. We would say Katie Novak, and then it would be like, Katie Novak is always visible doing important work. Katie Novak, communicates in a way that is helpful, respectful, and timely. Katie Novak is an incredible resource and helps me when I need it. And we did this for me. We did this for the superintendent, the director of special education, the director of business and finance, the director of technology and human resources. And I will tell you right now that if you ever do this, it is not for the faint of heart. Okay. It was the best modeling I've ever done and one of the most difficult things I've ever done. So we were a new administration team. There was a lot of turnover. All of us came in together and we said, we better practice what we preach, because we cannot talk about the importance of voice and not be willing to hear the voices ourselves. So if we're going to say to teachers, you need to ask students about their, what's their experiences, and their perception becomes reality, then we need to do that as well. And so I was like, this is what we're going to do. And my colleagues were like, absolutely not. We're not doing it. I'm like, no, this is really important. We're going to do it. Right. So, one thing that we got was our grade. And so if you strongly agreed with the term, Katie Novak, communicates, respectfully, then you didn't have to make a comment. But if you disagreed or you strongly disagreed, then you had to, there was like an asterisk that said, like, if you're going to answer this way, just give us some feedback. And we provided the sentence down. You could either fill out, it would be cool if, or have you considered? Okay. So if somebody feels like I'm not visible, they could say something like, it would be really cool if, we saw you in the schools more. Or have you ever considered, just spending like, one lunch a month at each school so we could like stop by and ask questions, right? Those are some of the things that I received as feedback. So it was like really great. But when you ask for feedback, as much as you try to prepare yourself and to prepare people to give it respectfully, the reality is that you might not receive it in that way. And all of us received some feedback that was not given in that way. And it would have been really easy to say, like, they had their chance to say it respectfully, forget it. And it was hard. So we went over the feedback triggers beforehand and we talked about it. And then one thing that I thought that we could do that would make things just like a little lighter was it was totally anonymous. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Jimmy Kimmel Mean Tweets, which is like this little section he does where he takes like things that people write about celebrities and they give them to the celebrities and the celebrities have to read them out loud, like in front of a camera. And like, you'll have like, very, very famous people like LeBron James being like, LeBron James is the dumbest person I've ever met. And he's like, what? Like, what? What? Why am I dumb? Right. So it's a cute little skit. And so I basically said to everybody, like, all of us are going to get some hard feedback and let me just make you feel better about yourself. And so I made like a video, like just reading out loud some of the things that were said about me. And it was like, it lightened, it helped other people see that, again, this work is about impact. And as much as I have so many intentions of helping all of my 400 colleagues feel as though I'm visible to them and I'm a resource to them, I have absolutely failed in many ways to do that. Even a 95% approval rating means that, 50, 60 staff members don't feel as though I am present, that I'm there. And the most important voices for me are those. And one of the comments, just to make you feel better about any comments that you got, and like, I'm going to like laugh about it. Like, I'm beyond it now because it was kind of like, oh, that was harsh. But when I further read the comments, I actually agreed. But the opening statement of the feedback was all caps on my life was, Katie Novak is useless, period, all caps. And it was like, Well, that was honest and heartbreaking, but let's see why. And actually, it was amazing feedback that changed my practice always. I can tell you about the feedback because the person said that what I am always doing in school is I'm just too busy to do anything, and I'm always on my phone, and I'm not approachable, and I'm not friendly. And I was thinking about like what would make somebody say that. And I knew it's because my goal as an administrator was always to get in 300 classrooms a year. No matter what, I would watch 300 classrooms a year, and I would like take notes about those classrooms. But every time I left a classroom, I would immediately go on my phone to put notes because I didn't want to seem rude when I was in the classroom taking notes on my phone. And so a lot of people's only exposure to me in the classroom was walking through the hallways going like this. And I was like, oh my word. Like I 100% do that. Like I'm 100% guilty of that. My intent was so I had notes so I could write an email that was meaningful, but the impact is I look unapproachable. I look really bitchy. I look like I'm not interested. And so I just basically said like, I'm going to have to literally in the classroom, write down a couple of keywords so I'm present in the hallway. I walked out into the hallway. I was like, hey, like there were people everywhere, right? If you go into the hallways during passing time, every teacher is there. I was like, hey, what's going on? It was some of the most meaningful advice, but it did start with Katie Novak is useless. And we have to get beyond that. And for me, like the feedback triggers, they're not only about us, but they're also, again, for students, helping them see you might be defensive about this. But that's why I think relationships are so important. So it has been an absolute pleasure to work with all of you. And please feel free to keep in touch. Kristen will keep you abreast of the work that we are going to be doing together in the spring, but definitely feel free to share any of these resources. Feel free to contact me, and I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. Kristen, any last words before we like dance our way out of here?
That's it. Just thank you so much on behalf of our team. You're amazing, Katie. And please send our best to Mirko, who was amazing to have him the first couple of sessions. That was a gift. And everyone else, thanks so much. And we'll see you on the next webinar.
Bye, everybody.
Amelina, DNA. Not type on the gas. When I'm so common and when I'm doing the loose and I need to be Changanya. Who did this never do? Did this never sell a body by Changanya? Kamualeho, 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 Kamualeho. Ni weekend imefika. Tunakwenda kujirusha. Fanya hima na tokota. Ana muda na yoyoma. Straight up, we be working from Monday to weekend. Only by time celebrate, we not sleeping. Love child, Amelina, DNA, keep this. Straight vibes from the club, no them can't beat this. Msuka tukivyetu mwana unanichanganya. Niko fiti mwenzako, futuni kwako mwenzangu nanzingua. See me work hard, me just got cleared. Pocket full of cash, spend the time, been afraid. Want to get this swagger on, know it's kinda late. Looking like a star now, sorry for the delay. When I'm so common and when I do none of those and I need to be Changanya. Who did this never do? Did this never sell a body by Changanya? Kamualeho, 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 Kamualeho. Don't get no better than this. Take what you want, come and get your wish. Kawani feel jo karibu, si tuko hapa tumekuja kuharibu. Tuko hapa.